There was once an old man and an old woman who were not blessed with little ones. The home seemed bare, with no children to skitter through the kitchen, make pillow castles, or laugh in the four corners of the cottage. The garden felt wintry, with no bright legs dangling from branches of the trees. "Old man," said the old woman, "I yearn for a son. There is a log in the yard. Will you carve it into a boy for us?" The old man carved the log into the shape of a boy. It was strong, brown, and solidly built. The old woman wept with happiness when she saw it. She kissed the tip of its nose and placed it in the same cradle she herself had slept in as a child. The next day, the log was gone. In its place was a soft, curled, sleeping little human. It had turned into a real boy. His mother called him Ivasik, Little Stick. Ivasik Little Stick grew with the speed of green leaves in springtime. He sprouted up like a bold tree, wiry and strong. He had a loving nature, a quick laugh, and a clever mind. Yet the home was too small for him, and soon the four walls could not contain him. He was mischievous and playful, and hung far too often from coat hangers, and swung far too often from doors. His parents realized they would need to devise some activities to occupy him, for they could not play with him all day long. "What would you like to do during the sunny hours?" the parents asked their son. Ivasik knew that he was intrigued by the river that ran by the end of their farm. It whispered to him, singing songs of silverfish and yabbies, pebbles and moonswell. "If you make me a boat and an oar, father," said Ivasik, "I can catch you fish for supper." Ivasik Little Stick soon discovered that he was a good fisherman, for he was patient and enthusiastic about his new activity. Every evening he brought home one gleaming cod, scales silver as money, for his family to enjoy for dinner. His mother knew that an evil snake lived near to the river bank, but she also knew that her son loved feeling the gentle breeze whisper on his arms and legs as he floated through the dappled sunlight. And he loved being old enough to provide food for his family. She had never seen Ivasik so happy. She thought she could keep him safe then by telling him what she knew. "There is an evil snake who lives in the rushes," she said. "Do not swim to shore, Ivasik Little Stick, unless you hear my own voice calling you." Now, the snake was not a very clever creature, despite its reputation for trickery and cunning. It heard the mother's words, but believed that it could trick little Ivasik anyway. "Swim to the shore, Ivasik," cried the snake. "Come and meet me in the rushes, and I will give you a chocolate." The snake's voice was deep and throaty, for she belonged to the world's deep underground and in caves. Of course, Ivasik Little Stick knew very well that this voice was not his mother's. Her voice was quite different. It was very soft and loving. Knowing that the voice was not his mother's, Ivasik ignored it and fished until his mother called him. That sunset, watching Ivasik and his mother return to their home along the walking path that ran through the farm and meadows, the snake cursed and considered its shortcomings. It decided to go to the blacksmith. "Blacksmith," said the snake in its gravelled tones, "I would like a finer voice box. Please craft me a slim steel voice box in the same shape as Ivasik's mother's." The blacksmith carved a new voice box and nestled it in the snake's throat over her usual one. Now, the next day, when Ivasik heard the snake call out, "Ivasik Little Stick, come over to the bulrushes, we can share a cake together," Ivasik did not know it was not his mother. He slid into the water and paddled over, leaving his canoe bobbing in the centre of the river. The snake was overjoyed. She grabbed Ivasik by the throat and carried him to her home. When the snake arrived at the front door, her daughter Olenka awaited. She was a sleek and muscled reptile who was often mistaken for an eel. Her skin was fiery red, and her two long fangs gleamed. "Put this boy in the oven," the snake said to Olenka. "I will tell our guests to come and feast on child with us." Olenka grinned, her pupilless eyes excited. She laid twigs and hay on the fire until it rose 5 feet from the oven. Then she wound her way around the shovel used for coal and held it towards Ivasikk. "Sit on this shovel," she said, "so I can get you in the oven." Ivasikk's mind was clearly no longer made of wood, for he saw the folly that such an action would bring him. He would be baked. So, being a clever little person, he only looked confused. "Shovel?" he said. "What is a shovel?" "This thing," said Olenka. She waved the spade in the air. It was already hot from the raging heat of the furnace, and she anxiously placed it down again. "Here, sit on it," she said. "Sit?" said Ivasikk. "But I cannot understand your language. What does it mean to sit?" "Like you would on a chair," said Olenka, and she tried unsuccessfully to wind herself around a chair and show him. Ivasikk only furrowed his brow and looked exceedingly perplexed. "But the shovel is not a chair." "It is like a chair. Here, I will hold it." "Why don't I hold it?" said Ivasikk, "and you can show me how to sit on it." Well, like her mother, Olenka was not too clever, for a serpent's brain is as small as a bird's. When she wound herself on the shovel to show Ivasikk how to sit on it, he gave one giant heave and pushed her into the oven, then slammed the door shut with his shoe. Presently the snake returned with her guests. The aromas of Olenka made them believe that good food was in the oven. "But where is my daughter?" hissed the snake, annoyed. She waited, but Olenka did not come to meet them. Eventually, believing her very rude, the snake told her guests to eat. They shoveled Olenka from the oven and ate her, believing her to be Ivasikk, and tasting well deliciously of eel as well. The whole time the snake and her guests ate Olenka, Ivasikk had been watching them from high in a tree outside the window. Only when they finished and they began to compliment the tenderness of children did he begin to throw stones at the window, which made them look up and see him there. "You have eaten Olenka," said Ivasikk. The snake let out a mighty roar and thrashed at the glass. It shattered, and she and the guests streamed out and surrounded the tree. They gnashed their greasy teeth and whipped their tails at the trunk, but they could not gnaw away the wood, and they could not get Ivasikk down. "Let us go to the blacksmith," cried the snake. All at once they turned and disappeared. At the blacksmith's, they asked him to fit them with iron teeth. Fearing their bloodlust and wild temper, the blacksmith complied. The snake and her guests all returned with iron teeth. With the sound of steel, they thrashed once more at the tree trunk and very nearly brought it down. Ivasikk felt the groaning of the tree. Every clash of the creature's iron teeth made the branch he was sitting on lurch with sickening momentum. Suddenly, Ivasikk noticed a flock of swans passing in the sky. "Help me!" he cried to the first flock, but they ignored him and flew higher. "Help me!" he cried to the second flock. They cast a disinterested gaze at the chaos below and continued swiftly on. "Help me, dear swans!" he cried to a third flock. "We are already too late," they honked, and in one fleet gliding motion they were gone. But here was a young swan struggling behind the last pack. He was sick and hungry and could not keep up with his brethren. "Please help me," cried Ivasikk. The swan began to wing past, but then he felt sorry for the boy. He liked snakes no better than humans did, and circled back. Ivasikk clambered onto his soft shoulders just as the tree cracked and rammed earthwards towards the frenzy. The swan did not fly easily, being already weakened and now carrying a strong young boy, but finally he delivered Ivasikk home. It was home. The air smelt of freshly cooking pies, and he could hear his parents talking in the kitchen. He stood at the window and called, "Mother, Father, let me in, it's your Ivasikk, little stick." They recognized his voice instantly and let him in. Seeing the wounded swan beside him, they at first believed their son had brought them meat for another pie, but when he told them how the majestic bird had saved him, they made him an honoured guest. They fed him the best grain, that he might be strong enough to rejoin his own flock, but the swan soon realized that he would rather a good home than a life of adventure, and perhaps even a little stick of his own. And so the old man carved a fine wooden egg for the swan. But that is another story. The end.